innovation has become a thing of present, and I think it is going to continue. So there is no two ways about it. But I would like to go back to the time when innovation had just begun, and innovation has always been there, but when people started seeing this as a way of continuing, or starting off new avenues in business, how was it back then for you? How did you look at innovation back then?
So one of the things that certainly interests me is that often something gets a label and people think that maybe it's just a new thing. Startups is one great example. People think that startups must be a new thing, but even for us in Australia, the more people that I talk to, I realize that even in the 70s, people were doing software businesses. Founders from Australia were going to San Francisco, to Silicon Valley, and we look back through even Australia's history, and wherever you call home, there will be a similar history where people have been very adventurous in the way that they try and make a living for themselves, and the way that they then try and provide for their family and build a community. And so one of the things that is interesting for me is that innovation is sometimes people feel like it's this new thing, that people have only been talking about innovation recently. But what's interesting to me is that the label innovation might have been applied to a lot more things recently, but it's not necessarily a new phenomena. And so innovation for me is all about being able to apply some creativity to a problem and come up with a new or different way of solving a problem. And so it's not necessarily about new to the world capability. So it's not about necessarily pure research, although sometimes good innovation flows from pure research. Certainly one of the people that I admire, a fellow named Edward de Bono, has done a lot of work on creative thinking. And I was at a conference one time when de Bono talked about having only recently, he has 2 sugars in his tea, and he only recently started putting the 2 packets of sugar together and tearing both of the lids off the sugar at the same time, so that he opened 2 sugars at the same time and tipped them both in his coffee. And for him, he was saying, like, that's an innovation. Like, for me, here I came to solve this problem in a completely new way, even though I've been having tea. And at that stage, he was quite a mature gentleman, been having tea for decades. Here was a new way of putting sugar into his tea. And so for me, innovation can come from anywhere, and it's about being creative, but it's always, for me, about actually solving a problem. One of my favorite definitions of innovation comes from a group called Inventium. Inventium was set up by a woman, Amantha Imber, who's just amazing. And her definition of innovation is change that adds value. And so the tearing of the 2 packets of sugar at the one time, like, that's adding value. It's saving time. It's getting the job done more quickly, more simply. And so innovation is around being creative in trying to figure out how to add value, how to get a problem solved in a new way that hopefully is more efficient or better in some way. But for me, back when I first became conscious of innovation, it certainly wasn't in my early years. I really think even in my early years as an engineer, a lot of the work that I did was on improvement and process improvement and quality assurance. Those were things that I spent a lot of time doing. But innovation was this thing where people started to talk about bringing improvement ideas from other sectors. One of the really interesting ones was a Formula One when they do a pit change. And so for anyone who watches car racing, like, it is just amazing what a pit crew gets done in seconds.
Yeah.
And so the whole thing is just so well organized, and the team spends so much time practicing. And so that idea of being really focused and having that pit crew focus is something that got transferred into the business I was into Mobil. into a really different setting. And that was innovative. It was bringing this solution that existed in a whole different context and bringing it into yours. And there was some tweaking, which was accompanied by some great collaboration and learning. But it was about bringing this really almost crazy idea into the business and solving a problem in a really different way. And so it sort of extended from that, the improvement and the general sort of process improvement that I was already doing as an engineer. And this label, I guess, of innovation was around that trying to solve a business problem in a really new way. And so over the last few years, you're absolutely right. People are referring to innovation a lot more. There's even now there's job titles in organizations around innovation lead or other innovation roles. And so I think when it gets to the point where there are actually job titles in an organization, that's when it's become I guess a lot more formal, maybe is one way to describe it. And so it has come a long way in the time that I've been thinking about being in